Hey everyone! How's it going? Thank you all for coming in here today. Really appreciate you doing this after a full day of classes. So really wanted to just take the time, build a community, but also talk about something that happened recently. I am with No Azure for Apartheid, and today I'm going to be sort of giving y'all, I don't know actually, how many people were at my first teaching, which was like a couple weeks back? Okay, a couple of people. Okay, so that's good, because y'all are going to see some of the same slides again, but maybe slightly updated. But really excited to be here and talk a little bit about our campaign. So I want to get everybody sort of on the same level about what is No Azure for Apartheid. No Azure for Apartheid is a collection of current and former Microsoft workers. Our campaign is demanding Microsoft end its complicity in Israeli genocide. We kind of center our campaign around 4 key demands. First one is IOF off Azure, which specifically calls to cut the cloud and AI contracts that Microsoft has with the Israeli military and government. The second demand is disclose all ties. We know that Microsoft embeds itself in a wide range of services, units, military, government, company, weapons manufacturer, and we want to understand or want Microsoft to disclose how it's embedded in those systems of genocide and apartheid. Third thing was to call for a ceasefire. This was honoring an earlier petition that was circulating among workers for Microsoft to use this platform as a company that is bigger in some nation states to call for a ceasefire. And lastly, to protect employees who are Palestinian, Arab, Muslim, or pro-Palestinian who have been discriminated against, harassed, retaliated against for calling out Microsoft companies. So I'm going to ask a question, which have you heard about this? This news came out on September 25th of Microsoft blocking Israel's use of some of its technology that was being used for mass surveillance. Show of hands who have seen this news. Damn, okay, we made some headlines. But do you all know how this all started? Actually, show of hands. 50-50. Yes, usually the complicity doesn't hit as much as the divestment. But the way this started was on August 6th, The Guardian, a couple of investigative journalists, Harry and Yuval, released this really in-depth investigation called A Million Calls an Hour. It was an article that sort of showed how back in 2021, Satya Nadella, the Microsoft CEO, had met with Unit 8200 chief called Yossi Sariel, where they agreed on building a mass surveillance weapon. This surveillance weapon would go on to record a million calls an hour. It would record every call, every text taken by a Palestinian in Gaza and the West Bank. And then these calls would get stored on Microsoft Azure Cloud. And these calls kind of amounted to around 11,500 terabytes. They were stored in the Netherlands part of it as well. So it wasn't even on some form of secure cloud. It just literally your civilian cloud has massive amounts of calls and texts from Palestinians that was taken or stolen from them. It was also confirmed in that article that this mass surveillance weapon would not have been possible without Microsoft sort of cloud and AI, in the sense that the reason Yossi Sariel, the chief of Unit 8200, when it came to Microsoft was we could not do this. Literally, the capacity of Israel as a nation state to surveil every Palestinian is not possible without a company like Microsoft. And what do you think Microsoft's response to this deal in 2021 was? Any guesses? How do you think? Would Microsoft be no, we value the human rights, we uphold, we don't want to cause the surveillance to happen? Any thoughts? Yeah, exactly. In their framing, when this deal came through, it was oh, this is a powerful brand moment. Imagine storing all of this data on Azure Cloud and AI. Oh, the amount of millions that we're going to make out of this, and how this partnership is so critical. And this was actually quotes. You can go read the original article, and these quotes are quotes by Satya Nadella and Microsoft executives when they sort of met with Yossi Sariel. This was also a big shift in in the story of Microsoft complicity, because 50 days later, sort of from this moment, Microsoft announced that it sort of blocked these services to Unit 8200. And you'd wonder, like, wow, like these are the same executives. Why would they do something like this? You know, are they finally like their conscience sort of like rose up? They are like meeting the moment? Of course not. And that's why I'm here today. Of like how, if we do act, change is possible. And my goal today is we're gonna discuss sort of the 50 days between the announcement of this article and the divestment, but we're gonna also discuss the year and a half before those 50 days. And we're gonna discuss what it looks like for us for the days to come, because that is sort of the big element that I wanna deliver today on. So let me start by sort of like how NOAA is sort of an acronym for No Azure for Apartheid. Don't ask me how we got there, but how we started was Microsoft had a really strong PR image. It had this like global human rights statements. You search Microsoft and it has an office at the UN. You search Microsoft and it's responsible AI is their brand. We are all for climate. They're part of Climate Week. If you go to New York, like all of these sort of more facade whitewashing attempts is what comes up when you search Microsoft. Despite all the mounting evidence before this article came about, Microsoft would always ignore, would dismiss, it would decline to comment. Like the investigative journalist would be like, hey Microsoft, tell us about these contracts, what do you think of them? And Microsoft would be like, decline to comment, decline to comment. And at the same time, the workers who would speak up would just get insanely retaliated against. We're talking about like weaponized HR investigations, we talk about financial sanctions, talk about firing. Last October, 2 employees who had organized a vigil, I'm not even talking about a rally, I'm not talking about in cabinet, I'm not talking about sitting, a vigil, were fired for just organizing that vigil. So it's sort of like just setting the context of how No Azure for Apartheid started. But from this moment, or from this standing, we realized as a campaign that we needed to move with a strategy that fed into each other, the strategy that sort of looked at different parts, and those were kind of the pillars of how we thought we could approach this. One, we realized that we, the workers, whose labor is being exploited to enable these systems of genocide and apartheid, are best positioned to rise up and revolt for being part of that system. So our key element here is we wanted to build a strong worker base. Workers who understood our role in this and who took action based on that role. The second piece was uncover and circulate Microsoft's role in the genocide. I said, very strong facade, very strong ethical image. How can we get people to know that actually Microsoft, the same company who's building Windows or who's on Excel or on PowerPoint or Teams or whatever they are like building, is the same one that is selling digital arms in the form of cloud and AI, which in my earlier teaching I will talk about how they became bombs and bullets, but hopefully I can link maybe some of that teach-in later so y'all can see sort of how these cloud and AI became digital arms. And the last thing, which was really a moment of confrontation, but also a realization that when you think about Microsoft, you think about the $4 trillion company, or however much they their market cap is right now. You think about this nameless entity, bigger than nation state, but actually what we saw is that there were executives, there were decision makers who at the end of the day had to be the ones shaking their hands with war criminals like Benjamin Netanyahu, who had to be there in rooms to sign on these contracts. And that's where the idea of like, how can we create crisis is specifically for those individuals like Satya Nadella, the CEO, Brad Smith, the president of Microsoft, in the case of this legal department. So when we talk about building a strong worker base, this is a strategy, and through that you apply the tactics, right? We talk about tabling and flying. I can show you sort of the many iterations of scenes that we went through. Things from as simple as, oh, did you know that Microsoft does this? To things like, hey, come join us. Hey, show up to this worker town hall. We delivered the petition was one of our key elements where we sort of laid out why, as workers, we are calling out Microsoft complicity. What are our demands? What is the framing of these demands? we delivered what we call a worker pledge, which is this really thoughtful piece of work where we kind of, using international law and using Microsoft policies, came up with a way where workers can say, I will not work for the Israeli military, and you cannot do anything against me, Microsoft, because I'm protected by your own policy. It was a really powerful moment. We started circulating sort of company-wide mass emails. These are emails, we understood that Microsoft controlled the corporate space, which meant that we could not talk to people in the standard way, we could not talk through those channels that they kind of discussion channels, because we would get shut down, censored, and so on. So we employed these like company-wide mass emails, where in a lot of these there are call to actions for the workers. Hey, sign the petition. Hey, take this pledge. Hey, join No Azure for Apartheid. And it was so popular that Microsoft at one point banned the word Palestine, Gaza, and genocide. So any email you could send with these words would literally be banned. And we ended up circumventing that too. But there are other things as well as like maintaining an on-campus presence through these visuals, building worker town halls where we join like a teach-in of just the workers, telling them like, here's what we have been doing, here's how you can learn about Microsoft Simplicity, but also providing ways for workers through this thing called Worker Toolkit, which is like, you're not part of our campaign, but you want to talk about Palestine and you want to protest the company, here's some simple ways. Like, here's how you can ask questions to your manager. Here's you can ask questions in company town halls. Here is how you set your profile picture, status, email, and so on. Something as simple as just getting people in the door. Obviously, these might not have been visible to y'all just because they are part of sort of internal work streams. The other piece around uncovering and circulating was actually our very first foray into the campaign, sort of like when the campaign launched on May 15th, 2024, our first thing that we announced was this Marriage Made in Hell, which was a play on a statement that Netanyahu said about Microsoft and Israel, where he said Microsoft and Israel are marriage made in heaven. So Marriage Made in Hell was a research paper where we went into previous articles, we went into the Israeli government, like contracts, tried to translate them to uncover what parts was Microsoft contracting with, and it came about so like different things, so like how Microsoft contracts with the Israeli police and Israeli prison service and the water company and this university on illegal settlements. So it was kind of like, for the very first time, all of these resources that talked about Microsoft Simplicity were in one place where people can, in 10 minutes, read how Microsoft played a role in the apartheid system. Fun fact, like a year later, the same article was actually quoted in a submission to the UN in the Microsoft, in the article from Economy of Occupation, Economy of Genocide by Francesca Albanese. So like that research that was started like came back way, way later to cement Microsoft as one of those companies complicit in system or economy of genocide, apartheid, and occupation. But we thought also about like doing work with traditional press, using social media as a tactic to circulate Microsoft complicity. So you see some flash designs here and there. Again, the company-wide mass emails, I keep going back to those, were a tactic that helped work across very different pillars of strategy. Because in those company-wide mass emails, while we tell people, hey, come do this, we also taught them about Microsoft complicity. We taught them about how Microsoft plays a role in it. And then we do teach-ins every now and then, so maybe this is part of the strategy if you think so. But then the other pillar, which is about just creating a crisis for Microsoft executives and decision makers, this was maybe a little bit sooner, February this year, but basically what had happened was in January, there was a huge article drop, an investigation by The Guardian, plus 972, drop site news that cemented how Microsoft was dealing with the military in a very specific way. It talked about which units they were working with, it talked about how much money were they paying, we talked about how customer support worked, and we realized that when Microsoft sort of received these news, they didn't feel like they had to respond. They feel like they could just decline to comment and wait for the news cycle, which moves really fast these days, to just like wait it out. And we were like, that is not enough. For us, just showing up the complicity and building a worker base was not enough. We had to put pressure on those decision makers. So we started in February 2025 with an in-person town hall protest in front of Satya Nadella where 5 people wore shirts, "Does our code kill kids, Satya?" Which is the very first time our campaign took on the idea of like, we have to call out executives by name. They are the ones who are decision makers. They are the one who's causing this. Following up in March 2025, there was a protest and a disruption for Brad Smith, the president of Microsoft, but also Steve Ballmer, the former CEO. They were just doing a PR event, and we were like, they're disrupting their flow, or disrupting their sort of whitewashing attempts. Fast forward to one of our biggest, actions was on the 50th anniversary of Microsoft is a 50-year-old company now, and they decided that on April 4th that they would host everyone from around the world, and media and press, and we kind of had to be there. So we had an on-campus rally, but also, if you've seen Ibtihal and Vanya Agarwal protesting or disrupting Mustafa Sulaiman, Satya Nadella, Steve Ballmer, Bill Gates, in the middle of their 50th anniversary. And the most surprising thing is like, they were trying to use the 50th anniversary to show up some products, but actually all the coverage that came on it was about the protest, not about the product. So that is talking about stealing the moment from them, so it cements the company's role. In April as well, we worked with the BDS, or the BNC, to get Microsoft as a priority target on the BDS list. That is putting a lot of pressure because now there's a financial and economic risk, and those executives have to take action to mitigate that risk. And Microsoft, started to feel the pressure a little bit. That in May 15, which is sort of funny enough, it was the anniversary of our campaign. It was also the day of our Nakba. And we, also the day we delivered sort of some of our petition signatures to the executive, they came out with this statement. Microsoft's statement on issues related to technology, services, Israel, and Gaza. Very bland. But let me reread it to you. It was actually Microsoft's admission of its active role in Israel's genocide of Palestinian Gaza. Why? In this statement, it was for the very first time Microsoft admitted to working with the Israeli military in their own words. They admitted to providing the Azure cloud and AI services, including language translation. It also admitted to providing emergency support to the IOF in the wake of October 2023. And in the same line, which is really like hypocritical, dumb, they said, hey, we have proven that our cloud and AI was not used by the Israeli military to cause any harm in Gaza. And at the same time, they said, well, actually, we cannot tell how the Israeli military uses our technology because we don't have that sort of oversight over them. So it was a really interesting moment. And I think in this moment, once you get this acknowledgement, you're kind of faced with two choices. You can be like, well, I guess we did our part. They said no harm was being done in Gaza. We just believed them. They're a big company, but I guess that was not our campaign. We went to create more crisis for them. So literally 4 days after this, at their annual conference, we did a rally, internal destruction of Satya Nadella, protested in front of the convention center. A few weeks later, we shut down the Responsible AI conference, again, going around and stealing the moments where they whitewash themselves and using it to sort of propagate the messaging that they are part of the genocidal systems. Putting some pressure on them financially by developing a shareholder resolution that had 60 co-filers and 80 million shares. So you can think about sort of how these strategies are now trying to come together, right? You are causing these disruptions and at the same time going back and saying, look, all of these disruptions are a fiduciary risk for the company. And in July 2025, for the very first time, the Special Rapporteur called for the executives to be tried at the International Criminal Court for the commission of crimes in genocide. So that now you have a legal basis to think about how to put pressure on these executives. And then we saw this news. This news was also very interesting in a sense that it was a direct sort of confirmation, again, of Microsoft's role in the genocide, but also that there was an executive that was directly implicated in these investigations. Before, it was like this nameless entity, Microsoft has ties with the Israeli military, but now there was one person called Satya Nadella who shook hands with the OC Sariel. And Microsoft's response to that was like, he only was there for 10 minutes. Don't know if I believe that. But it was also a direct refutation of the statement that Microsoft came about with 3 months before. Because now you had people in the Israeli military, you had Microsoft workers telling you, actually no, these surveillance technology was used to offer deadly strikes in Gaza and blackmail, harass, and kill Palestinians in the West Bank. So it was a direct refutation to that. And Microsoft kind of took a slightly different response, which was they were like, okay, actually, let's launch a formal investigation. We don't know what Unit 8200 was doing with our services. So they, for the very first time, they were like, we were unaware. Again, at this moment in time, you could think about, well, we could just sit back, see how this investigation plays out. But we were laser focused on our demand, and that's why we decided to kind of escalate. One, we reject the premise that Microsoft was unaware. And they reject the premise of they wanted to launch this investigation. The investigations have been done by these investigative journalists, but also the fact that the technology every single second is being used to commit genocide in Gaza and ethnic cleansing and apartheid in the West Bank means that there is no legal, ethical, or moral way to do business with the Israeli military. So this was a stalling tactic. And in the same month, on August 19th, former and current workers, as well as community members, circulated a call for the worker intifada. It's a framing of the uprising of workers who refused to allow their labor to be part of the genocide. We launched an encampment on Microsoft campus. In response, Microsoft sort of militarizes campus, called on the people of the Redmond Police Department, the Bellevue Police Department, the Washington State Patrol, and they ended up arresting, I believe, around 20 protesters that day. Again, if given the choice, you could sit back, but our decision was always to escalate. So former and current workers and community members took the kayaks to protest on the water in front of Brad Smith and Satya Nadella's house. I don't know if people have seen this picture. It's pretty cool, like flotilla type imagery. And then following about it in a couple of days, we launched a series of actions on campus. People staged a sit-in front of Brad Smith's office. People were on a rally, delivered the petition of the 2,000 workers who had signed, and raised the Palestinian flag on campus. Don't ask me how. And then Microsoft was in crisis, in the sense that they felt that they were losing the narrative war. They felt like if they allowed more people to talk about this, it would lead to really bad, revolt inside the company. So literally within the same day, within the sit-in, they shut down the internal communication channel where you could talk to senior leadership. You had people like the Bloomberg, which is a financial sort of news outlet, calling Microsoft at the center of worker protests. People calling like, this is the first time someone has done this against Microsoft in their 20 years of coverage. And Microsoft framing is that we can retaliate and repress and use brute force to stop this. Or take a new position, which is to block these services. This is obviously really an important moment in our organizing campaign, and honestly all worker organizing campaign, and even the Palestine movement, because there are things that are unique about this. I'll tell you what it is, right? This came as a result of months and months and months of organizing. It came as a result of workers, community members, students, people across the whole mass movement for Palestine coming together to put a pressure on a company that is playing an active role in the genocide. It also is a moment because it's the very first US technology company to deny services to the Israeli military or to divest these types of contracts. And yeah, I mean, this would not have been possible without that continuous pressure and without this organizing. If that was not there, this could have been just like what happened in January and February, where Microsoft just declined to comment and decided to do nothing about it, right? But also, I want to sober us up a little bit of what it is not, right? This is not the full divestment that we talk about. Microsoft contracts with the Mamram unit, the Air Force unit, the Naval Forces, the Prime Office of the Prime Minister, the Mexican, the water company. All of these remain intact, and all of these still continue to be part of the genocidal systems and apartheid systems that is happening, right? We also know that it's only a specific subset of cloud and AI, right? It's not all cloud and AI. It's not all the arms. It's not an arms embargo in a way, right? This is only a specific subset. Because in the same sentence that Microsoft says it cuts ties with a specific unit, they reaffirm their commercial relationship with the Israeli military as a whole, right? They say, we believe it's still a strong partnership, right? And at the same time that Microsoft divested, the Unit 8200 in the same week were like, yeah, we're moving into AWS. We're moving into the other cloud provider who also operates at a much bigger scale than a nation state. So it kind of proves how our struggles, how these tech companies, first of all, are interconnected in their complicity, right? They are not playing the role. The fact that Microsoft is able to do this means that Amazon and Google will try to win this contract at some point. But also the fact that our struggles have to be interconnected across these. So where do we go from here, right? A lot of ideas can flow into your head, and you're like, well, you just got a big divestment win. Maybe you should like relax a little bit and just like think and celebrate and so on. But we are sobered up and grounded in the work that we do. In that, again, no legal, ethical, or moral way for Microsoft to be selling its cloud and AI to the Israeli military, to an entity that's committing genocide and apartheid. That is the demand. The demand is not to get an investigation. The demand is not to get a PR statement. The demand is not to get cut some subset of service of cloud and AI. The demand is no cloud and AI for the Israeli military, and we stay laser focused on that. Two, Microsoft, by choosing to maintain this partnership after the fact that the Israeli military has been sort of called for its genocidal role, and Microsoft knew that in the fact that the Israeli military was violating all of these like rules and laws about surveillance, right? Is Microsoft's active choice to be a technological backbone to the Israeli genocidal systems, right? It's an active decision. It's not unaware. It is not, well, I just didn't know. It's not just a bottom line. It's an active decision to continue to play that part. And while the whole movement is calling for an arms embargo, we also call for a digital arms embargo because these cloud and AI have been weaponized to be part of the Israeli war machine. We have to continue to escalate. We have to continue to put pressure. We have to continue to think about our strategy that has been validated by this divestment win and see how can we do better. See what tactics have we not explored yet. And that's sort of the moment not to take a step back, but to escalate and continue to put the pressure until our demands are met. And then the fact that this is not just the Microsoft workers, right? It's to all workers of conscience whose labor is being used to enable this genocide, that we need to take that step as a collective. And lastly, it's not ask. It is not demand an end to the genocide. It's to force an end to the genocide, which means that workers, community members, students, people all over the world have to come together to unite behind that our movement does not stop, our movement does not rest, our movement does not end at partial divestments, does not end at investigations. It only ends when there is an end to the genocide and there is a liberated Palestine from the River to the Sea. And going back, right, all of this organizing comes back to strategy, comes back to tactic, comes back to how things feed into each other. And it's validating, right? It's validating to see a partial divestment now, but it also means that this work needs to continue. This strategy needs to be applied even more. I said a whole lot of things. This is a lot of information. So I want to maybe take a few questions before maybe we jump into a little bit of discussion.
Wait, thank you so much for coming. That was really inspiring. I'm really curious what the organizational structure is behind NOAA. Like, how do you guys think about strategy? How do you guys decide on risk assessments? How do you guys coordinate these really complicated strategic decisions and direct actions?
I think it's democratic in nature, right? It's a campaign by the workers for the workers. So every worker who's part of No Azure for Apartheid gets a choice to say, I believe this is the strategy, I believe this is the tactic, and use that collective voice, right? It's not someone making a decision top down. It's everyone is needs to be bought into the vision. Everyone needs to find that sense of ownership of applying that. And in the campaign, right, you have to understand that it is by design that you only see a few faces, right? It's there is a nameless army of folks, not these or a nameless community of folks who are strategizing, thinking about tactics, who are applying pressure, but they will never be part of like this public imagery. Reason being, people get retaliated against, right? People get fired for speaking up, and until we kind of get our demands of ending the discrimination against workers, right? There are not people who risk tolerance are not there yet, because people still have to be looking out for their mortgages and looking out for their safety of their families and kids and everything along that line. So risk tolerance is a spectrum, capacity is a spectrum, and our goal as a campaign as No Azure for Apartheid is to provide a room for every form of risk tolerance, every form of capacity to contribute, right? You want to contribute? Come as is, join our democratic process, and collectively we take action. It's not an individualist action, it's a we decide what we do and how we move forward.
You mentioned like sending out company-wide emails, and I guess I'm like curious about how you do that in a way that like protects like the, like what email address are you sending this from? Who are you sending this to? Like just like I don't know.
Yeah.
If that makes sense what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah. No, I mean Microsoft it's an internal email, by the way, right? Like so technically you can send emails to anyone based on some limits and some rules, right? And I think we found a way to think about how can we send this to as many inboxes as possible while not being, blocked by the rule system. And that's why we had to change the rule. Like, go back, I didn't include it here, I guess, but in May 2025, so like a few months back, they just instituted a ban. Like, you can read about it in the news where like, any email, even if you're sending it to your friend, it has the word Gaza, Palestine, genocide, will just get halted and quarantined, right? So I think, like, thinking about those company-wide mass emails, it was a strategy for us because we realized that sort of like when we use the internal channels that Microsoft provided to us, our questions or posts or like publicizing something would get shadow banned. Like there's an internal platform, it's very well documented also in the news, like where you would ask a question, be like, hey, how's Microsoft applying this human rights standard? Because the United Nations report just came out and it's telling you they are complicit in the economy of genocide. And a moderator would come in and says, okay, closing this thread. That's it. Right? So we realized that the tools that were afforded to us, the so-called proper channels, were not doing the job of publicizing complicity internally, and company-wide mass emails that reached thousands of people became a tactic to try and circulate the information. So it was not sort of like, hey, we wanted to do mass emails for the sake of mass emails. We were thinking about, well, how do we tell other workers that their company is using their labor to enable this genocide, because Microsoft silos people very well through like these proper channels. Like you build your say like, oh, just go ask a question at the AMA, but the AMA is only softball question and it's pre-filtered and pre-approved. So like these questions don't get answered, right? You don't get the platform. So how do you go about letting other workers know that Microsoft is complicit within the tools that are afforded to you? I wanted to sort of, because this was a lot of information, I think what I wanted to do is sort of take some time as a group to discuss this. So I'm going to do my favorite thing, and maybe not everyone's favorite thing, which is to split into discussion groups. So maybe like, I'm seeing, can I do quick math? I think maybe groups of 5, so that sort of like, and try to discuss these 3 questions. So these are kind of seeding questions in a sense, where like use them as a starting point, see where the discussion takes you from there, and then we'll come back and share out